Just a quick note before we get to this last segment, I recorded it before Will Stein was announced as the hire at Kentucky. My thoughts on the caliber of the job still stand. So not as splashy in news, but still rather important because you never know. Cal and Kentucky are available head coaching jobs. Mark Stoops and Justin Wilcox, they are done. I want to start with California Golden Bears. Their option could already be in-house. They have two former head coaches on their staff already. Nick Rolovich, who was at Hawaii and then was at Washington State and was fired from Pullman for non-football reasons. Whether you agree with it or not, it wasn't because he wasn't having success up there. That could be an option. Brian Harsin, the Boise State head coach, the Auburn head coach, once upon a time, he's on staff. That could be an option. It's notable that Rolovich has the interim tag, and Harsin is there as the offense coordinator. I don't know how that's received in the building. We'll see. Ron Rivera is their general manager. He was an NFL head coach and is now running that program. This is his first big move. His crosstown counterpart, who just beat his program and got Justin Wilcox fired, Andrew Luck, hired Tavita Pritchard. Now, I talked about on yesterday's show, I'm not crazy about that hire. I don't think that it's the best Stanford could have done. You bring in a guy like Andrew Luck to have presence and gravitas to attract a candidate who isn't a Stanford guy that feels like an easy hire who you know and are familiar with. So Cal is now in that position where they have some familiarity with Rolovich and Brian Harsin, and maybe they feel like those guys are equipped to lead their program. If they were to go outside, a name that has popped up a lot is Oregon defensive coordinator Tosh Lupoi. Now, the progress and recruiting for Oregon's defense over the last several years, and yes, outright strong production on the field, has been really good up in Eugene. I know that quite well. I cover it a little on the other show I host for this network. So I understand why he's a candidate. I also understand why there is serious hesitation. Because over a decade ago, Tosh Lupoi was once, I believe, Recruiter of the Year at Cal. He has always had strong recruiting chops, but his departure from Berkeley was not well received. Do people remember that? Have they forgotten? That's for Cal fans and boosters to decide how you'd feel about that potential move. If they're able to clear that hurdle, I do think Tosh Lupoi is ready to be a head coach, as ready as you can be. This is a guy who's been, I believe, two different types of position coaches. He's been a defensive coordinator under Dan Lanning and under Nick Saban as well at Alabama. He has been to the NFL. He has put guys into the NFL for a program that definitely needs some life. He'd be able to go to Berkeley. And look, I don't know exactly what their NIL situation is. And I think this would be an attractive job for Tosh because he's an alum. And you've got Jaren Kiave Sangapolo-Tele. You keep him, boy, you're starting at a pretty high floor compared to some of the other rebuilds like what Kentucky's next head coach might have to deal with. But if he goes there, if that emotional hurdle is able to be cleared, I think he could have success. Because when you can bring in talent, boy, especially in the ACC where there aren't a lot of premier recruiters, that can be a significant part of the game. There have been some other ones suggested, and a name to keep an eye on here, in my view, is Sean Lewis down at San Diego State, who has been a head coach, who has been a Power 4 coordinator, who is getting a chance to be a head coach again, and he just went 9-3 with San Diego State. Their preseason win total was 4.5. It was one of my favorite over bets of the entire year because I knew he would do a good job. He's done even better than I thought, and they have been a darn good team. Now, the tricky thing is, would you be able to pull San Diego State's defensive coordinator along with him? Because the defense has been the driving force, and they have been nothing short of sensational. I know they just lost to New Mexico. I'll talk about that in a moment. But Sean Lewis at San Diego State, definitely a name to keep an eye on there. Speaking of New Mexico, I think Jason Eck would have been a home run hire, but New Mexico just extended him. So that gets even more expensive. And when Cal owes as much money as they do to Justin Wilcox, I don't suspect that they would be willing to pony up the extra buyout money that now exists for Jason Eck, who's a darn good football coach and will be a Power 4 head coach one day. I don't think they're going to go in that particular direction. But those are a few of the names. They're not the only ones, but those are a few of the names to keep an eye on there. I understand the appeal of Rolovich, and if he gives you the best chance to keep JKS, then maybe that's the right hire. But I would seriously look at Sean Lewis. I think Sean Lewis is good. I really do. But the appeal of Tosh Lupoi, totally understand it. So that's a glimpse at Cal. On the other side of the country, you have Kentucky, who, coincidentally, is also looking at an Oregon coordinator, offensive coordinator Will Stein. So Stein has only been Oregon's OC for 3 years now. He was at UTSA before that. He has produced 2 straight Heisman Trophy finalists in Bo Nix and Dylan Gabriel. And Dante Moore, well, you can see the development he's had compared to his time at UCLA. It's been pretty exceptional. And Oregon is in the playoff for the 2nd straight season. So Stein's credentials readily available. He's a really good offensive coordinator. You, if you look hard enough online, can find a corner of the Oregon fan base that isn't as big of a fan collectively as Will Stein. I do not agree with those particular folks. I kind of get where they're coming from, but overall, I think Will Stein is a really good OC, a good play caller, creative, clever, good in the pass game, underrated in the run game. That's taken a big step forward this year. Here's the kicker, though. His parents went to Kentucky. He grew up going to games at Kentucky. He went to Louisville because he didn't get an offer to go play football at Kentucky, but he's from the state and he's got strong ties and grew up going to games at Kentucky. That's a pretty appeal. Now, my first reaction is probably similar to many of your guys' first reaction, which is, man, who wants the Kentucky job? Give me one trait, one trait about the Kentucky job that you wouldn't have said about the Indiana job before Curt Cignetti got there. Anytime these jobs come up, and look, I think for coaching outcomes, it's not fair to compare everybody to Curt Cignetti because he's just really, really good, and there aren't that many of those guys. From a blueprint standpoint, I think it is fair to say, why would someone take that job? Because if you're the right guy and you believe it's your time and you do things the right way, you can succeed. By the way, we live in an era, think about how many guys Will Stein has recruited to Oregon, by the way, and how many he'd be able to potentially take with him to Kentucky. And Dan Lanning's been very vocal about how many guys he's been able to keep at Oregon. He's never lost a starter to the transfer portal. It's a really good achievement. Boy, that'd be put to the test if Will Stein left. But we're living in an era where Vanderbilt just won 10 games in the SEC. I think that John Sumrall can work at Florida. I think Alex Golesh can work at Auburn. I think Ryan Silverfield could even work at Arkansas. He's got more of an uphill battle. Don't tell me that any job in the SEC isn't worthwhile. Because Vanderbilt won 10 games. It can be done. The transfer portal has changed a lot in this wonderful sport. Now, other names that I have seen get tossed around there at Kentucky. Brian Hartline, the offensive coordinator at Ohio State, talked about him earlier in the show a bit. I think that's someone Penn State is going to go after very strongly. Incredible recruiter, clearly a good offensive coordinator. Julian Sain's results, hard to argue with. I don't think you're pulling Sain away from Ohio State, but Hartline's credentials readily available. Let me throw this one at you. I don't know if you guys are ready to hear this, but you're going to hear it anyway. Dan Mullen just won 10 games in his first season at UNLV. 10 games. You know how? He put together a transfer portal roster, and they didn't play perfectly early on, and then he got it figured out, and they are in the Mountain West Championship game. And there's not a high chance, but a small chance. They've got a Power 4 win at least over UCLA, for whatever that's worth. There's a small chance they could wind up in the college football playoff. If James Madison loses the Sun Belt Championship game, Duke wins the ACC Championship game, if UNLV beats Boise State at 11-2, they might be into the college football playoff through the ultimate backdoor, trapdoor, side door. It's somehow all three of them put together. Dan Mullen at UNLV, been in the SEC. Not like he was horrible at Florida. He just wasn't good enough. But one at Mississippi State, well, where's Mississippi State job-wise compared to Kentucky? Same kind of rung. I think I'd rather have a Mississippi State job. But is there a huge gap in the transfer portal era? I don't know. So that name is really, really interesting. And you have two different. I'm curious to see where these places go. Tosh has never been a head coach before. Does he get the nod at Cal? Will Stein's never been a head coach before, but Dan Mullen has. Does that give Mullen the edge or Will Stein the edge in the Kentucky job? And is Dan Mullen even a serious candidate? These are just things I wonder. But do not forget, for any of these jobs that come open, that if you hire the right coach and you do things properly behind the scenes, any job can look like a much better job than it currently does. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.